She was supposed to be furniture. Naomi Cole, 27, manuscript specialist turned waitress, had one rule at La Fortuna: serve the food, smile politely, and vanish. But tonight, in Miami's most exclusive private vault, not a room, a vault, Dante Moretti, the Mafia boss whose name made billionaires nervous, is about to sign away $100 million for ancestral Sicilian vineyards his family has hunted for 3 generations. The documents look flawless. The historian from Rome swears they're authentic. The 16th century notary seals are perfect. The ink oxidation is perfect. The Latin phrasing is perfect. Except it isn't. And Naomi, standing in the shadows with a water pitcher and a graduate degree in colonial manuscripts gathering dust in her memory, has exactly 3 seconds to do the unthinkable. Speak 5 words that will stop a catastrophic fraud, expose a deadly conspiracy within the Moretti family itself, and prove that the invisible black woman refilling glasses knows more about his legacy than his own experts. Miami in November was deceptive, warm enough to forget danger existed. On Brickell Avenue, where Maseratis prowled like predators and penthouse lights glittered like territorial markers, La Fortuna occupied the top 3 floors of a building that didn't advertise its name. To call it a restaurant was legally accurate, but spiritually misleading. La Fortuna was where cartel heads negotiated truces, where politicians made promises that would never see daylight, where conversations worth more than small countries happened over wine that cost more than rent. The reservation list didn't exist publicly because if you needed to ask, you'd never get in. And moving through this cathedral of power every night, carrying trays and wearing a uniform designed to erase her, was Naomi Cole. Before we dive into this absolutely unbelievable story, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment down below telling me where you're watching from right now, your city, your country. I'm reading every single one. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a love story wrapped in gunfire, forgeries worth hundreds of millions, and a betrayal that shattered one of the most powerful crime families in the world. It's the story of what happens when a brilliant black woman who spent 4 years teaching herself to disappear decides she's done being invisible. And tonight, for the first time ever, I'm telling you the complete, unfiltered story of Naomi Cole, the waitress who brought down an empire with nothing but her eyes, her mind, and a refusal to stay quiet. So grab something strong, turn the lights down low, and let's uncover the truth behind the 2 words that changed everything. At 27, Naomi had perfected the art of disappearing. Her natural hair was always wrapped into a sleek, tight bun that pulled at her scalp. Her uniform, crisp white shirt, black vest, black slacks, was always immaculate. Her expression was always pleasant but completely neutral, the kind of face that customers looked through, not at. She moved through the dining room like smoke, filling gaps, anticipating needs, never creating friction. She was invisible by survival because if anyone looked too closely, they might ask questions. Questions about why a woman with her education was balancing plates instead of analyzing manuscripts. 4 years ago, Naomi Cole had been the youngest researcher accepted into Columbia's Advanced Manuscript Authentication Program. Her master's thesis on detecting colonial-era forgeries had been cited in a Smithsonian exhibition. She'd received job offers from auction houses, museums, and private collectors who paid six figures for authentication work. Then her baby brother Marcus collapsed during basketball practice. Kidney failure, genetic, catastrophic. He was 16. The transplant list was years long. Dialysis was $7,000 a week, and their mother's insurance covered exactly none of it. Naomi had made a calculation. Research positions paid $42,000 a year. La Fortuna's servers made that in 2 months during season. So she erased herself. Stopped returning calls from Christie's and Sotheby's. Let her academic advisors' emails pile up unanswered. Put her degrees in a storage unit along with everything else that didn't fit in her efficiency apartment. Put on an apron instead. That was 4 years ago. Marcus was still alive, stubbornly, expensively alive, 3 nights a week hooked to a machine that kept his blood clean. And Naomi was still invisible. Until tonight. Cole. Giovanni, La Fortuna's floor manager, had a voice like gravel wrapped in silk. Private vault. 8 o'clock. Dante Moretti doesn't tolerate errors. The name hit her like cold water. Everyone in Miami knew that name, even the people pretending they didn't. At 7:45 p.m., Naomi presented herself at the private elevator. A man shaped like a bulldozer checked her ID against a list, scanned her with a metal detector, and gestured her inside, without speaking. The vault was breathtaking. Walls carved from Italian marble. Oil paintings worth more than houses. Lighting designed to make million-dollar deals feel intimate. A single table commanded the space like an altar. At 8 p.m. exactly, Dante Moretti arrived. He was younger than the legend suggested, maybe 40, with the kind of presence that made expensive suits look like weapons. Dark hair swept back, sharp jawline, eyes that calculated 3 moves ahead. He moved like someone who'd never questioned whether a room belonged to him. His entourage followed. An older man with silver temples, a woman carrying a leather briefcase like it contained state secrets, 2 younger men whose tailored suits couldn't hide what they were. Naomi poured water, still, no ice, and melted into the corner. At 8:15, the sellers arrived. A distinguished historian from Rome, gray-haired and confident. Beside him, a lawyer from what Naomi assumed was the Moretti family's legal team, carrying himself with the smugness of someone holding all the cards. Mr. Moretti. The historian's Italian accent was thick, theatrical. Tonight, your family's search ends. Dante's handshake was brief, controlled. Show me. The historian placed his briefcase on the table with ceremonial reverence. Inside, cushioned in archival foam, lay documents that made Naomi's breath stop. Parchment, genuine, aged to perfection. Dense handwritten Italian in iron gall ink. A crimson wax seal at the bottom, ornate and official. The Moretti Vineyard Grant of 1537, the historian announced, signed by the Viceroy of Sicily, confirming your family's hereditary ownership of the lost estates near Palermo. Authenticated by the Sicilian State Archives, the University of Catania, and independently verified by 3 separate experts. Naomi was supposed to be arranging wine glasses. Instead, every nerve in her body had gone electric. She knew 16th century Sicilian notary documents. She'd spent 8 months analyzing them for her thesis on Mediterranean land fraud. She could draw the standard seal formats from memory. And this one was wrong. The Moretti family lawyer leaned forward, smooth as oil. With this documentation, you have legal standing to reclaim the estates. Current estimated value, $100 million. All that's required is your signature on the purchase agreement and the fund transfer. Dante's associate, the silver-haired man, adjusted his glasses and studied the parchment. Sembra autentico. It seemed authentic because the components were authentic. The parchment was real 16th century vellum. The ink was genuine period iron gall. Even the wax was correct era beeswax. But the document itself was a masterpiece of fraud. Naomi had studied Sicilian notarial conventions obsessively. The spacing between characters was wrong, too uniform, suggesting modern tracing. The date format used Arabic numerals in a position where Roman numerals would have been mandatory. The abbreviation for hereditary rights was spelled in a way that didn't exist until the 1600s. And the seal. The seal had a synthetic sheen under the vault-specific lighting, the kind of polymer-based wax that forgers used because it aged identically to the real thing, but held sharper details. Someone had taken genuine antique materials and constructed a perfect lie. It was brilliant, nearly undetectable, a $100 million trap. Dante picked up a fountain pen, heavy gold, the kind that signed empires. Once you sign and transfer the funds, the lawyer said, sliding papers forward, the documentation legally transfers to you. The estates become yours. The pen hovered over paper. Naomi had maybe 2 seconds to decide who she was going to be. The invisible waitress who kept her head down and her brother alive. Or the scholar who couldn't watch a work of art, even a criminal one, succeed without consequence. Her mother's voice, exhausted from double shifts but fierce. Baby, when you know the truth and stay quiet, you become part of the lie. The pen touched paper. Signore non firmi. Sir, don't sign. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, clear Italian cutting through the silence like a blade. Everyone froze. Security hands moved toward concealed weapons. The lawyer's face went white. The historian looked confused. And Dante Moretti, very slowly, set down the pen and turned to look at her. His expression was unreadable. His voice was quiet, dangerous. She say too. Who are you? Naomi's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to take it back, to bow her head and fade into the wallpaper, to become furniture again. But Dante Moretti's eyes were on her now, and there was no going back to invisible. I asked you a question. His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Who are you? The security team had fully shifted now, hands inside jackets, bodies angled toward threat elimination. The historian's confusion had curdled into something defensive. The lawyer looked like he might vomit. Naomi's mouth was desert dry. I'm nobody, signore. Just a waitress. But that document. She pointed with a trembling hand. You can't sign it. It's not authentic. The historian exploded. Assurdo. Ridiculous. This document has been verified by Silenzio. Dante's single word cut like a guillotine. The room went silent. He studied Naomi with the intensity of someone who'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing when someone was lying, when they were afraid, when they were telling a truth they desperately didn't want to tell. You're a waitress, he said slowly, who speaks Italian, and knows enough about 16th century documents to challenge Dr. Caruso from the Roman Institute of Historical Studies. He tilted his head. Explain. Naomi wanted to run, wanted to rewind time, wanted to be anywhere but here. But Marcus's face flashed in her mind. 16 years old, hooked to a dialysis machine, trusting her to keep him alive. And her mother's voice. When you know the truth and stay quiet, you become part of the lie. She took a breath and stepped fully out of the corner, into the light. The date format is wrong, she said, and her voice miraculously didn't shake. Sicilian notaries in 1537 would have used Roman numerals for the day and month. This uses Arabic numerals in the third position, which wasn't standard practice until after 1580. Dr. Caruso sputtered. The variations in regional practice. The abbreviation for hereditary rights, Naomi continued, pointing but not touching, is spelled her DT-RE in the fourth line. That abbreviation didn't exist until the early 17th century. In 1537, it would have been HRD, TR, or written fully as hereditario. The lawyer's face had gone from white to gray. This is absurd. She's a waitress. The spacing between characters. Naomi said, her academic training taking over now, the thesis defense mode she hadn't used in 4 years snapping back into place. It's too uniform. 16th century scribes worked by hand, with natural variations in letter spacing, especially in longer words. This text shows mechanical consistency. Someone traced it from a template, probably digitally enhanced, then transferred it. Dante's silver-haired associate had pulled out a magnifying loupe and was now examining the document. His expression darkened. The wax seal. Naomi pointed to the crimson stamp. Under this specific lighting, there's a synthetic sheen. Real 16th century beeswax oxidizes differently. It develops a matte patina with microcrystalline irregularities. This is too smooth. It's polymer-based, designed to age identically to authentic wax but hold sharper detail impressions. Impossible, Dr. Caruso said, but his voice had lost its certainty. The seal was tested. By whom? Dante's question was a razor. Silence. Naomi pressed on, momentum carrying her now. The signature at the bottom, the Viceroy's signature, has duplicate pressure points. See here and here? She indicated without touching. The ink density is identical in strokes that should show natural variation. It's a copy, probably traced from an authentic signature on a different document, then reproduced. The silver-haired man looked up from his loupe.
Dante. She's right.
The wax is wrong. And these spacing inconsistencies. He straightened, his face hard. This is a forgery. The room erupted. The lawyer lunged for his briefcase.
Security moved.
Dr. Caruso began a frantic defense about authentication protocols and institutional reputations. Dante raised one hand. Silence crashed down like a breaking wave. He looked at the historian, at the lawyer, at his own associate, then back to Naomi, and something in his expression shifted. Not gratitude, not yet, but calculation, reassessment. Everyone leave, he said quietly, except her. Naomi's blood turned to ice. The lawyer tried to protest. Mr. Moretti, the contract terms. I said leave. Dante's voice dropped to something subterranean. And nobody goes far. We're going to have a very detailed conversation about how this document arrived at my table claiming to be authentic. Security escorted them out, the historian protesting his institutional credentials, the lawyer white-faced and silent, the associate casting worried glances back at Dante.
Then it was just the two of them.
Dante Moretti and the waitress, who just destroyed a $100 million deal. Naomi thought about her brother. About her mother, about how her body probably wouldn't be found for days. Dante walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at Miami's glittering skyline. For a long moment he said nothing. How did you know? He finally asked. Naomi swallowed. I used to work in manuscript authentication. Before I needed money faster than that field pays. Your name? Naomi Cole. He turned from the window. And you saw what 3 institutional experts missed. In the time it took to refill water glasses. They weren't looking for forgery, Naomi said. When you're told something is authentic, when it has credentials and seals and reputation behind it, you see what you expect to see. But she stopped. You what? I wrote my master's thesis on colonial-era land fraud. Specifically, how forgers exploit trust and institutional validation to authenticate fake claims. I've studied more fraudulent documents than real ones. Dante was silent for a long moment, studying her with those calculating eyes. Then he did something that shocked her more than anything else that night. He smiled. Not warmly, there was nothing warm about Dante Moretti, but with something like respect.
Walk with me, he said.
I what? You just saved me from losing $100 million. He moved toward the door. And more importantly, you saw what experts I paid couldn't see, which means one of two things. He paused, hand on the door. Either you're the smartest person I've met in 5 years, or someone very close to me just tried to destroy me. Naomi's stomach dropped. Destroy you? Dante opened the door to a private corridor lined with silent, armed men. That wasn't a forgery made for money, Miss Cole. Not with that level of sophistication, that attention to detail, those credentials behind it. His voice went cold. That was made to get me somewhere else. Vulnerable, distracted, off my guard. Horror crawled up Naomi's spine. You mean? A bodyguard appeared at the corridor's end, moving fast.
Boss.
Movement on the adjacent rooftop. Sniper scope reflection now gone. The world tilted. Dante grabbed Naomi's arm, not roughly, but with absolute authority. Seems you didn't just save my money, Miss Cole. Security swarmed around them, weapons drawn, radios crackling. You saved my life. The corridor exploded into controlled chaos. Dante's security team moved with military precision, bodies forming a human barrier around them, weapons drawn, radios spitting rapid-fire Italian. Naomi's legs felt like water, but Dante's grip on her arm was iron, pulling her forward. Move. His voice was command, not request. They rounded a corner into a secondary hallway, this one narrower, lined with original Renaissance paintings that probably cost more than small countries. Dante's phone was already at his ear. Russo. Lockdown protocol. Nobody leaves the building. Find out who had roof access in the last hour. He listened, jaw tightening. I don't care what credentials they showed. Find them. Naomi's mind was racing, spiraling. I don't understand. Why would? The forgery wasn't the endgame, Dante said, still moving, his team flowing around them like a tide. It was bait. Get me to sign documents that require physical presence in Sicily for verification. Isolated. Away from my security infrastructure. Easy target. But I stopped it. Exactly. He glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw something besides calculation in his eyes. Concern. Which means Plan A failed. Plan B appears to be eliminating loose ends while I'm still off balance. The implications hit her like cold water. I'm a loose end. You expose their forgery. You can identify the people who brought it. And you have expertise they can't risk being used again. Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. Yes, Miss Cole. You're a very inconvenient loose end. A light fixture above them exploded. Glass rained down like deadly snow. Naomi screamed. Another fixture shattered, then another, a diagonal line of destruction tracking toward them. Down. Dante roared. He slammed into Naomi, his body covering hers as they hit the marble floor behind a massive stone column. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Above them, bullets chewed through the ceiling, punching holes in priceless artwork, decimating crystal light fixtures. The sound was deafening. Movie gunfire didn't prepare you for the real thing. The sharp cracks, the ringing echoes, the smell of hot metal and plaster dust. Dante's security returned fire, controlled bursts aimed at the skylights 60 feet above. Glass cascaded down in sheets. Service corridor, 30 feet. You're 6, someone shouted. Dante hauled Naomi up. Can you run? She nodded, couldn't speak. Wasn't sure her legs would cooperate, but when he pulled her forward, somehow they moved. They sprinted down the corridor, the world reduced to the sound of her heartbeat and gunfire, and Dante's hand locked around her wrist. 2 security guards flanked them, moving backward, weapons raised, covering their retreat. Another doorway. This one looked wrong, not the polished elegance of the restaurant's public spaces. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, service areas guests never saw. They plunged into a stairwell, taking stairs 3 at a time, Dante's security team a practice machine around them. Naomi's lungs burned. Her server shoes, designed for quiet elegance, not escape, slipped on the concrete steps. Why me? She gasped out. I'm nobody. I'm a waitress. They can just. You're a manuscript expert who just proved she can detect sophisticated forgeries. Dante didn't slow, his voice steady despite the pace. You're a witness who can testify. And you stopped a plan that probably cost someone millions to orchestrate. He glanced back at her. In their mind, you're everything. They burst through a door into the underground parking garage. The temperature drop was immediate, the space vast and shadowed, filled with cars that cost more than houses. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled like concrete and expensive gasoline. Dante's lead security guard, the concrete wall man from the elevator, spoke rapidly into his radio. Extraction vehicle, position 3. ETA, 30 seconds. 3 black SUVs materialized from the shadows, engines already running. Professional. Prepared for exactly this scenario. Naomi's hands shook so badly she couldn't control them. My brother. My mother. They'll go after. Give me addresses. Dante was already on his phone. They'll have protection within 10 minutes. Name, location, go. She rattled off information. Marcus at the dialysis center on 12th, her mother at their apartment in Little Havana, her voice breaking on the details. Dante relayed everything to whoever was on the other end with the efficiency of someone who'd protected people before. A SUV pulled alongside them, door already open. Dante's hand pressed against her back, guiding her toward it. That's when she noticed. "Where's the lawyer?" she asked. "And the historian, are they in custody? Shouldn't they?" Dante's head snapped up. His eyes found his second in command, the silver-haired man from the vault. "Russo, where's Marco?" Russo's expression went dark. Marco was escorting the lawyer to holding. "I sent him 5 minutes ago." And no response on radio. "I assumed interference from." Marco doesn't go dark. Dante's voice could have cut steel. Ever. The security team exchanged looks. The kind of looks that said everything. Russo pulled his weapon, gestured to two guards. "Third sublevel. Now." They disappeared into the stairwell, moving fast and silent. Naomi's voice came out small. "Marco was one of yours." "Marco's been with me for 8 years. Dante's jaw was granite. "He stood at my father's funeral. He's godfather to my nephew." Then why would he? I don't know that he did. Yet. But Dante's eyes said he was calculating possibilities, running scenarios, already 3 moves ahead. "Get in the vehicle." Naomi climbed into the SUV, her body moving on autopilot. The leather seats felt surreal, too luxurious for a moment when people were trying to kill her. Security piled in around them, weapons ready, eyes scanning. Russo returned, his face grim. He leaned into Dante's window. "Marco's radio is on the floor, 3rd sublevel, northeast corner. Smashed. No blood, no signs of struggle." He paused. "The lawyer and historian are both gone. Emergency exit door was propped open from the inside. Someone left it that way." Silence. Dante's expression didn't change, but something cold settled into his eyes. Something that made Naomi understand why people spoke his name in whispers. "How long has Marco worked security on the private vault level?" he asked quietly. 3 years. "Who approved the historian's credentials?" "Marco verified them with the authentication committee." "Who had advanced knowledge of tonight's meeting?" Russo's silence was answer enough. Dante sat back, his hand resting on the door handle, knuckles white. When he spoke, his voice was soft, deadly. "It's not an outside attack." He looked at Naomi, and she saw the calculation shifting to something else. Realization. Fury. "It's internal. Someone in my own organization just tried to kill me." The SUV pulled out of the garage, into Miami's neon-lit streets, away from the restaurant where Naomi's life had shattered. She thought about her brother, her mother, her carefully constructed invisibility. All of it was gone now. And somewhere in the city, someone who'd planned a perfect crime was realizing their invisible witness was still alive, still dangerous, and now under the protection of the one man they'd tried to destroy. The safe house was nothing like Naomi expected. Not some grim concrete bunker, but a penthouse in Coconut Grove with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. Elegant, minimalist, and, she was certain, fortified like a military installation behind the designer furniture. Dante's team had swept her mother and Marcus here within 20 minutes. Her mother, still in her hospital scrubs from her nursing shift, held Naomi like she might disappear. Marcus, pale and exhausted from evening dialysis, kept asking if this was real or some kind of movie. "You're safe," Naomi had told them, hoping it was true. "Just stay here. Don't leave. Don't call anyone." Now, 2 hours later, she sat in what Dante called his working office, a room that looked like a war room with multiple screens, encrypted phones, and 6 of his most trusted people crowded around a conference table. Except how trusted were they really? Dante stood at the head of the table, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 2 hours. Russo laid out documents, authentication reports, personnel files, security logs. Marco Fiorentino. Russo's voice was flat, professional, but Naomi could hear the anger underneath. Family lawyer for 12 years. Handled every major contract, every property acquisition, every legal exposure we've had since Dante's father died. Dante's jaw worked. He said nothing. He verified Dr. Caruso's credentials, Russo continued. He arranged the meeting. He personally vouched for the document's authenticity. And he had advanced knowledge of every security protocol for tonight. "That doesn't prove," one of the guards started. "His radio signature shows he was on the 3rd sublevel for 90 seconds before going dark," Russo interrupted. "Long enough to escort 2 men out an emergency exit and destroy his own communication device to create the appearance of an attack."
He looked at Dante.
Marco's car left the parking garage at 8:47 p.m. 8 minutes after the shooting started. Silence. Naomi's hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She'd been invisible for 4 years. Now she was sitting in a Mafia boss's war room, watching a family disintegrate. "May I see the authentication documents?" she asked quietly. Everyone looked at her. She'd almost forgotten she was allowed to speak. Dante gestured. Russo slid a folder across the table. Naomi opened it, and her academic training kicked in automatically. Authentication reports from the Sicilian State Archives. Verification from the University of Catania. Independent analysis from 3 specialists. All of it looked perfect. Almost. "These timestamps," she said, pointing. "The Catania report is dated March 15th. But the reference number format changed on March 1st when they updated their cataloging system. This uses the old format." Russo leaned in. Meaning someone created a document designed to look like it came from Catania, but they didn't know about an administrative change that happened 2 weeks before the supposed verification date. She flipped pages. "And this signature from the Sicilian archives, it's Dr. Santoro's signature, but the pressure pattern is wrong. It's a stamp or a digital reproduction, not an original signature." "Marco would have known that," Russo said slowly. "Marco arranged all the authentication," another guard added. "He was the liaison with every institution." Naomi kept reading, her stomach sinking. These weren't verification failures. These were manufactured. Someone created an entire paper trail of legitimacy, knowing it would only be checked if things went wrong. She looked up. This wasn't rushed. This took months, maybe a year. Dante had moved to the window, staring out at the bay, his back to the room. His shoulders were rigid. Why? His voice was quiet. Not for money. Marcos made millions as our lawyer. He has everything. Power, Naomi said. The word came out before she could stop it. Dante turned.
She shouldn't speak.
This wasn't her world, but the pieces were fitting together with the same clarity she'd felt looking at the forged documents. If you'd signed those papers, you would have traveled to Sicily for the property verification, she said. Away from Miami. Away from your infrastructure. In a foreign country where ambush would be easier to arrange and harder to trace. Russo's eyes widened. Madonna. And if the assassination succeeded, Naomi continued, the academic part of her brain assembling the logic, Marco would be positioned as the trusted lawyer who could guide the family through the transition. He'd have credibility, institutional knowledge, the appearance of legitimacy. This wasn't a robbery, Dante said, his voice hollow. It was a coup. The room erupted in Italian, voices overlapping in anger and disbelief. Someone punched the wall. Someone else started making calls. But Naomi watched Dante. She saw the moment it truly hit him. Not the strategic threat, not the business implications, but the personal devastation. His face didn't change. Men like him had learned not to show weakness, but something in his eyes went dark and empty. He was at my father's funeral, Dante said to no one in particular. He held my mother when she collapsed. I made him godfather to my sister's son. His hands curled into fists. 12 years. The room went quiet. Russo started to speak, stopped, uncertain how to address grief in a man who'd built a reputation on never showing it. Naomi surprised herself by standing, by walking over to where Dante stood isolated at the window. For what it's worth, she said quietly, betrayal says everything about him and nothing about you. You trusted someone who was trustworthy for 12 years, until he chose not to be. That's not a failure. That's just human. Dante looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as a problem to solve or a witness to manage, but as a person. You didn't have to speak up tonight, he said. You didn't have to risk your life for a stranger. Especially a stranger like me. Naomi thought about her mother's words, about truth and silence and complicity, about the person she'd been before invisibility. I couldn't watch art, even criminal art, succeed, she said, even if stopping it meant becoming visible again. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Not warmth. She suspected warmth wasn't something he allowed himself, but respect, recognition. I don't know why you helped me, Miss Cole, he said, but I won't forget it. Russo's phone buzzed. Then another phone. Then 3 more, a cascade of alerts that made everyone in the room tense. Russo looked at the screen, his face going pale. He showed it to Dante. Dante's jaw tightened. He turned to Naomi. Miss Cole, do you have your phone? Yes, in my purse. She'd barely thought about it since the shooting.
Check it. Now.
Naomi dug out her phone with shaking hands. 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. And a text message received 14 minutes ago. Unknown number. No name. Just 7 words that made her blood turn to ice. Stay quiet or you die tonight. Attached was a photo. Her apartment. Her actual apartment in Little Havana, photographed from across the street. Timestamp 9:47 p.m. 23 minutes ago. The phone slipped from her hands. Dante caught it, looked at the screen, and his expression went from stone to something far more dangerous. They know where she lives, Russo said, already moving. They've had eyes on her family. How? Someone demanded. We've had them under protection. Marco had access to all our protective details, Russo said grimly. He knew exactly where we'd take them. Naomi couldn't breathe. Her mother, Marcus, sitting in a safe house that maybe wasn't safe at all. Dante was already issuing orders, his voice crisp and controlled despite whatever was happening behind his eyes. Secondary location, Route 3. Transfer the family now. Radio silence until...
His phone rang.
Not buzzed.
Rang.
An actual call, the old-fashioned ringtone that sounded wrong in the modern room. Dante looked at the caller ID. His face hardened. It's Marco, he said quietly. Everyone froze. The phone kept ringing, obscenely loud in the sudden silence. Dante looked at Naomi, then at the phone, then back at her. He's calling to negotiate, Dante said. Or to gloat. Or to confirm whether you're alive. Don't answer it, Russo said. But Naomi saw the calculation in Dante's eyes. The same calculation she'd seen when he'd assessed the forged documents. He answered. Put it on speaker. Marco's voice filled the war room like smoke from a burning photograph. Familiar, sentimental, lethal.
Dante.
I assume the waitress is listening. Naomi's skin prickled. Every man in the room turned toward the phone in Dante's hand as if it were a loaded gun. Dante's thumb hovered over the screen.
He didn't speak.
He waited. Marco chuckled, soft and paternal, the same laugh Naomi had heard him give in the vault when he'd complimented the vintage Barolo. You always did like an audience. Put me on speaker, vecchio amico. Let's not be rude. Dante tapped the button. The chuckle became a presence. Good, Marco continued. Miss Cole, Naomi, may I call you Naomi? You have an extraordinary gift. My experts spent 11 months and $4 million making that vineyard grant perfect. You broke it in 90 seconds. Brava. Naomi's mouth went dry. Dante's eyes flicked to her, steady, unreadable, giving her the choice. She stepped closer to the phone. You used polymer wax with titanium dioxide filler, she said, voice calm even as her pulse hammered. Amateur mistake. Real 16th century wax crazes in micro patterns under LED. Yours scattered light like cheap lip gloss. A pause. Then Marco laughed again, delighted. You see? This is why we can't let you live. Dante's knuckles whitened. Name your price, Marco. Whatever they're paying, I'll double it. Oh, Dante. Marco's tone turned almost tender. It was never about money. It was about legacy. Yours ends tonight. Hers ends in the next 10 minutes unless you do exactly what I say. Russo was already tracing the call, fingers flying over a tablet, shaking his head. Burner, rerouted through 7 countries. Send the girl out, Marco said.
Alone.
Northwest Service Gate. 5 minutes. She walks away. Your mother keeps breathing. Your sister keeps breathing. The boy on dialysis keeps the new kidney I know you've been shopping the black market for. Naomi felt the room tilt. Dante's gaze snapped to her, sharp with the same realization. Marco had everything. Medical records.
Bribes.
Access. Dante's voice dropped to a whisper of pure winter. You touch my family, I will salt the earth where your children play. For minutes, 30 seconds, Marco said pleasantly, and ended the call. Chaos tried to erupt, men shouted protocols, drew weapons, started for the door. Dante's single raised hand froze them like statues. He looked at Naomi. Miss Cole, he said quietly, I need you to do what you do best. He gestured to the conference table stacked with folders, hard drives, ledgers. 12 years of Moretti family legal history that Marco had curated. Find me the rest of the poison. His men stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Boss, Russo hissed, we don't have time. We have 4 minutes, Dante cut in. And the only person in this room who's beaten Marco tonight is her. Naomi didn't wait for permission. She sat, pulled the first folder, and disappeared into the thing she hadn't done in 4 years. The work. Pages flipped under her fingers like cards in a deck only she could read.
Deeds.
Contracts. Debt instruments. Trust amendments. Her eyes moved in the way they once had in the dim light of Columbia's rare book room, scanning for the microscopic tells that separated truth from lie. 30 seconds in, she found the first fracture. This deed, she said, not looking up. 2019 purchase of the Coral Gables warehouse. The notary seal is embossed with a 2021 die. They backdated it, then used the wrong tool. Russo leaned over her shoulder. How the hell? Keep going, Dante ordered. Another folder. Shipping manifest for antiquities, 2022. The parchment is right, but the iron gall ink has modern vanadium traces. Post, 1950 formulation. She moved faster, hands blurring, brain on fire. 8 falsified property deeds. 3 doctored contracts that quietly transferred ownership of shipping routes to shell companies. A fabricated debt transfer, $47 million. That would trigger default clauses and bankrupt the legitimate side of the empire in 90 days. And then the worst. A revised family trust executed 6 months ago that named Marco sole executor upon Dante's death and gave him voting control of every holding. Naomi pushed the document across the table. He didn't just want you dead. He wanted to become you. Every forgery is a thread. Pull one. The entire legacy unravels into his hands. The room was silent except for her breathing and the distant thump of a helicopter, probably Marco's extraction. Dante stared at the trust amendment like it was a corpse. Then he looked at Naomi, and something new moved behind his eyes. Not gratitude. Recognition. You just saved my bloodline, he said softly. Again. One of the guards, big guy with a scar across his throat, snorted. She's a waitress who got lucky once. Dante's head turned. The man shut up. She's the only person here who isn't blind, Dante said. From now on, Miss Cole reviews every document that touches my family. Every signature requires her eyes first. The pushback was immediate, grumbled Italian, skeptical glances. One outright, she's not even Sicilian. Dante didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at each man until they remembered who he was. Then every screen in the room went black. Red text scrolled across them in perfect unison. Nice try, Dante. But history is written by the living. The building's lights flickered. Alarms began to wail, silent ones only the security team could hear. Russo swore. They're inside the servers. Global breach. Every offshore account. Every property record. A single gunshot cracked from the hallway outside the office. Dante moved faster than Naomi thought possible. He yanked her from the chair, shoved her behind the bulletproof credenza. Stay down. The door exploded inward. 2 masked men in tactical gear stepped through the smoke, suppressed rifles raised. Dante's guards returned fire. Russo took a round in the shoulder and kept shooting. Naomi's ears rang. She saw Dante's gun buck in his hand. Once, twice, both attackers dropped. But a third was already on the balcony. Glass doors sliding open, rifle aimed straight at her head. Dante dove, tackling her to the floor as the shot took a chunk out of the marble where her head had been. He rolled, came up firing. The third man jerked backward off the balcony into the night. Sirens in the distance. Too late. Dante hauled Naomi up, blood on his sleeve. His or someone else's, impossible to tell. We're burned here, he said. New location.
Now.
23 minutes later they were in an armored convoy tearing across the MacArthur Causeway, city lights strobing across their faces like a fever dream. Naomi sat beside Dante in the back seat, shaking with adrenaline and rage. He handed her a new phone. Secure. Burner. Your family is already on a jet to a place not even I know yet, he said. Different teams. Clean. She stared at him. How long have you had contingency plans that don't include you knowing where your own mother is? Since the day I took this chair. They pulled into an underground garage beneath a nondescript medical building in Coral Gables. Dante led her to a freight elevator that opened into what looked like a private clinic, except the patients were all armed. Safe House 3, he said. Biometric locks. Air-gapped. No digital footprint. Inside the main room, a single laptop sat on a steel table, screen glowing. An email waited in Dante's inbox. No sender. Subject line, confession. He opened it. A video file. In it, Dante, perfect digital deepfake, sat at a desk, calmly confessing to the murder of a federal judge in 2021. Every detail correct. Voice perfect. Mannerisms perfect. The file was time-stamped tomorrow morning. Attached was a note. By 8 a.m., this goes to every major outlet, the FBI, and Interpol. Unless Naomi Cole is dead by sunrise. Dante closed the laptop slowly. Naomi met his eyes. They're not trying to kill you anymore, she said, voice steady for the first time all night. They're trying to erase you. And somewhere in the city, Marco smiled, because the woman who saw everything was finally looking in the right direction. Straight at the end of the story he was trying to write. The safe house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after gunfire and before worse things. Naomi sat cross-legged on the steel table, the laptop open like a patient on an operating table. Dante stood behind her, one hand braced on the table's edge, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. The deepfake played on loop. Dante's face, Dante's voice, Dante's calm recitation of how he'd ordered the hit on Judge Emilio Reyes in 2021. Every cadence perfect. Every micro-expression stolen from real footage. Naomi paused the video at the 0:47 mark. Look here, she said, zooming on the signature at the bottom of the attached confession document. The loop in the capital D is too symmetrical. You write with a heavier downstroke on the left side. Old habit from fountain pens. This is mirrored. Someone traced your real signature from the 2023 port lease, then flipped it digitally, so the pressure looked even. Dante's reflection in the screen didn't move. Keep going. She opened the metadata. File creation timestamp says March 2021. But the compression codec is H.265 variant 4.1. Didn't exist until 2023. Someone forgot to scrub the encoder tag. Next, the scanned original document they'd attached as proof. High-resolution PDF of a handwritten confession on heavy cotton paper, supposedly signed the night of the murder. Naomi tilted the screen toward the overhead light. Paper's wrong. Reyes was killed in April 2021. This is 25% cotton rag with optical brighteners that weren't added to that mill stock until the 2022 batch. And the ink. She pulled up a spectral analysis she'd run on the scan. Iron gall base with synthetic indigo booster. Indigo wasn't stable in iron gall mixtures until a new polymer fixative came out in late 2022. Whoever aged this artificially used chemicals that literally didn't exist when this was written. She closed the laptop. It's flawless to anyone who isn't me, she said quietly. And lethal to you. Dante exhaled through his nose. Reyes was dirty. Took money from the Cubanos to bury evidence against them. When the FBI started circling, he decided to flip on everyone, me included. I didn't order the hit, but I didn't stop it either. His voice was raw, stripped of the armor he usually wore. I was 29. My father had been dead 6 weeks. If I'd shown weakness then, we'd all be dead now. So I let it happen. Naomi studied his face, not asking for absolution, just giving her the truth because she'd earned it. That video goes live, she said. You're arrested by noon. Federal custody. No bail for a cop killer, even a crooked one. Marco controls the board, the accounts, the men. You die in holding before arraignment. Your empire gets carved up by whichever family paid him the most. She watched the realization settle into his bones. Coup by lawfare, he said. Smarter than bullets. Russo knocked once and entered, face grim. We have chatter. Marco's in Naples, old country. Meeting with the Calabrese and 2 Mexican capos. They're dividing territory already. Your territory. Dante didn't flinch, but Naomi saw the muscle jump in his jaw. She stood. Then we don't play defense. He turned to her. We go public first, she said. Everything. The forgeries, the coup, the deep fake. I lay out the evidence so clearly that when their confession drops, it looks like the desperate move of cornered traders. Museums, universities, journalists. I still know people who owe me favors. We turn Marco's perfect lie into proof he's a liar. Dante stared at her for a long beat. You'd put yourself on every screen in the world, he said. The invisible waitress who brought down a Mafia empire. You'd never be safe again. Naomi gave a small, tired smile. I stopped being safe the moment I opened my mouth in that vault. At least this way Marcus gets to keep the kidney you found him. Something shifted in Dante's eyes, something that had nothing to do with strategy. He stepped closer, close enough that the room shrank to the space between them. You keep saving me, he said, voice low. Most people in my life take. You give. Why? Because someone has to stand in the light so the shadows don't win, she thought. Because I'm tired of being furniture. Instead, she said, because you're not the monster they say you are. You're just the one who hasn't had a choice in a very long time. His hand lifted, slow enough that she could move away. She didn't. His knuckles brushed her cheek, callous thumb tracing the place where exhaustion had drawn faint lines. I don't know how to keep you safe if you do this, he admitted. Then don't keep me safe, she whispered. Keep me lethal. For a moment the safe house, the war, the ticking clock, everything fell away. Then the lights cut out. Emergency red snapped on. Alarm screamed. Russo's voice barked over comms. Breach. Sublevel 2. Someone just cut the biometrics. Dante's gun was in his hand before Naomi could breathe. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her toward the panic room door. They found us, he said. The steel door hissed shut behind them, sealing with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid. On the monitor wall, grainy security feeds showed masked figures moving through corridors that were supposed to be impossible to find. Naomi stared at the screens, heart hammering. Someone hadn't just broken in. Someone had been invited, and they were already inside. The panic room door had barely sealed when the first explosion rocked the building. Not a breach charge, something bigger. The floor buckled. Dust rained from the ceiling. On the monitors, the corridor outside filled with black-clad mercenaries moving like they'd rehearsed this 100 times. Night vision goggles. Suppressed rifles. No patches, no insignia. Deniable assets. Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. Dante was already at the weapons locker, slamming magazines into a short-barreled rifle. How many? She asked. 12 on this level. More topside. His voice was calm, almost conversational. They'll blow the panic room in 90 seconds. Naomi looked at the monitors again. One merc knelt by the biometric panel, attaching a device that sparked blue. They weren't waiting 90 seconds. Dante tossed her a pistol. You know how to use this? I know how to not die. She didn't take the gun. Give me the maintenance tablet. He hesitated half a heartbeat, then handed it over. Naomi's fingers flew across the screen. She'd spent 4 years being invisible. She knew service corridors, blind spots, the paths people like her used when no one was looking. She killed the lights on sublevel 2, rerouted the fire suppression system, triggered every magnetic lock on the east wing. Medical gas lines run through the ceiling above them, she said. Halothane mix. Non-explosive, heavy, odorless. I just opened the valves and killed the exhaust fans. Dante's eyes flicked to her with something close to awe. 30 seconds until they're breathing anesthesia, she finished. We go west service duct. Now. They slipped out the panic room's secondary hatch, a crawl space barely wide enough for Dante's shoulders. Behind them, the main door blew inward with a concussive thud. Muffled shouts turned sluggish as the gas did its work. They moved fast, Naomi first because she was smaller, Dante covering rear. The duct spat them into a laundry room that stank of bleach and fear. She grabbed a linen cart, shoved it against the door as a makeshift barricade, then pointed to the freight elevator. Disabled it from the tablet, she said. They'll have to take stairs. Buys us 4 minutes. Dante was already prying open the elevator doors. He hot-wired the maintenance ladder. They climbed. Halfway up, the building shook again, controlled demolition, taking out structural supports. The safe house was being erased. They emerged onto the roof as rotors thundered overhead. A black helicopter, no markings, searchlights slicing the night. Mercenaries fast roped down. Then gunfire, different caliber, familiar somehow. Dante's voice cracked across the rooftop like a whip. Friendly. Hold fire. His own convoy, 3 SUVs, had screamed into the adjacent parking garage, men pouring out. Russo led them, shoulder bandaged, but moving like rage incarnate. The rooftop became a storm of muzzle flashes. Naomi dropped behind an AC unit, heart slamming against her ribs. She wasn't a soldier. She was a scholar who could spot a forged watermark at 20 paces. But she could count 12 mercs versus 8 of Dante's men. Bad odds. A mercenary flanked left, sighting on Dante's back. Naomi didn't think. She grabbed a loose rebar rod from the construction debris, swung it like a bat into the man's knee. Cartilage crunched. His rifle clattered. Dante spun, put 2 rounds in the man's chest before he could scream. Then Dante staggered. Blood bloomed dark across his left side, just below the ribs. Dante. He went to one knee, still firing, but the wound was ugly through and through, arterial spray with every heartbeat. Naomi dragged him behind cover as bullets whined overhead. She ripped open his shirt, pressed both palms to the exit wound. Pressure, she hissed. Look at me. Stay with me. His eyes found hers, glassy but fierce. Get out of here. Not happening. She yanked the belt from his waist, cinched it above the wound like a tourniquet for the torso. Then she tore strips from her own shirt, packed the entry and exit, bound it tight. Her hands were slick red, but the bleeding slowed. Russo and the remaining men pushed forward, driving the last mercs back to their helicopter. The bird lifted, door gun chattering, then banked hard as a rocket from Russo's launcher took its tail rotor. It spun, crashed into the bay in a bloom of fire. Silence fell, broken only by sirens far away. Dante's had lulled against her shoulder. They weren't trying to silence you anymore, he rasped. They wanted no body, no proof you ever existed. Naomi felt it settle cold in her gut. She was no longer a witness. She was evidence that needed to burn. Russo helped load Dante into the lead SUV. Naomi climbed in beside him, keeping pressure on the wound. Where to? Russo demanded. My house, Dante said through bloodied teeth. The estate. If we're going to war, we do it on ground I built. The convoy tore through Miami's pre-dawn streets, past neon that looked suddenly cheap and fragile. The Moretti estate sat on a private key west of Star Island, walled, gated, patrolled by men who'd known Dante since he was a boy. They carried him inside while Naomi followed, still soaked in his blood. In the marble-floored study that smelled of leather and old money, Dante's personal doctor worked fast. Stitches, plasma, antibiotics. Naomi stood nearby, arms wrapped around herself, watching the color creep back into his face. When the doctor left, 6 of Dante's oldest lieutenants filed in, Men whose loyalty had survived wars, indictments, funerals. One by one they knelt, pressed their foreheads to the back of Naomi's blood-stained hand. "We protect our own," the oldest said in Sicilian. "You saved the bloodline. You are our own." Naomi felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders like a mantle she hadn't asked for. Later, in the estate's secure library, walls of books hiding a climate-controlled vault, Naomi spread the recovered hard drives across a table. Dante sat beside her, bandaged but upright, refusing morphine. She worked in silence for an hour, decrypting, cross-referencing, tracing digital fingerprints. Then she stopped. "Dante." She turned the screen. A ledger of forged transactions, hundreds of millions routed through Liechtenstein shell companies, Vatican bank accounts, Panamanian trusts. Masterpieces of fraud that rewrote ownership of entire shipping lines, vineyards, galleries. A multinational ring capable of forging history itself. And at the very bottom, a single transfer authorization, signed with a private key Dante hadn't used since his father's death. The recipient account belonged to a trust in the name of Alessandra Moretti, Dante's younger sister. The one person he'd sworn could never be touched by this life. Naomi watched the realization hit him like a second bullet. The mastermind wasn't Marco. Marco was the architect. Alessandra was the patron. The woman Dante had sent away to school in Switzerland, shielded from the blood, the one he called Ogni Domenica, without fail, had paid to have her brother erased from the story entirely. The estate library smelled of old paper and gun oil. Dawn bled through the bulletproof glass, turning the room the color of dried blood. Dante stood over the table like a man at his own autopsy, staring at the trust transfer bearing his sister's name. Naomi watched the exact moment his heart finished breaking, shoulders dropping a fraction, eyes going flat and ancient. "It's not her," he said, voice hoarse. "Alessandra's in Lucerne. She hasn't touched the accounts in 3 years." Naomi reached past him, fingers steady despite everything, and isolated the private key used for authorization. She ran it against the encrypted ledger she'd pulled from the burned safe house. "The key was duplicated 18 months ago," she said quietly. "Someone had physical access to your father's old signet wallet. Only 3 people ever did." Dante closed his eyes.
Marco.
The name fell between them like a blade. Russo entered with a tablet, face carved from stone. "Confirmed. Marco landed in Naples 48 hours ago. He's meeting with the Calabrese and the Herrera cartel tonight. They're dividing our European routes like it's already done. The forgery syndicate out of Odessa is guaranteeing new paperwork for every seized asset within 72 hours of your arrest." Dante laughed once, short, ugly. He spent 12 years learning every artery of this family, so he could bleed it clean. Naomi laid out the dossier she'd built through the night, 211 pages of irrefutable proof. property deeds retroactively transferring ownership to shell companies Marco controlled. Deepfake source code with Odessa fingerprints. Bank transfers from rival families into Marco's personal accounts in Andorra. A drafted emergency succession document, already notarized, naming Marco interim capo upon Dante's incarceration or death. She slid the final page across. If the confession video drops tomorrow, the feds arrest you. The board invokes the emergency clause, and Marco walks in wearing your face. Legal. Bloodless. Perfect. Dante looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, the way he had the first night in the vault, but softer now, stripped of calculation. You saved my life more times than I can count, he said. And every time, it cost you something. Naomi's throat tightened. The violence follows me now. My brother's face when they moved him in the middle of the night. My mother praying in a language I didn't know she still remembered. I chose truth once, and now people shoot at me for it. She met his eyes. Tell me it stops. Tell me choosing you doesn't mean choosing this forever. Dante stepped close enough that she could see the faint scar through his left eyebrow, the exhaustion he refused to surrender to. I can protect you, he said, voice low. Not from the world being what it is, but from the worst of it. If you'll let me. His hand rose, slow, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. His palm settled against her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw like he was memorizing the shape of something precious and breakable. I don't know how to be safe anymore, she whispered. Then let me be the reason you don't have to be. The kiss wasn't sudden. It was inevitable. The slow collision of two people who'd been circling each other since the moment she'd said don't sign in perfect Italian. His mouth was careful at first, asking. Then deeper when she answered, her hands fisting in his shirt like letting go would unravel her. When they broke apart, foreheads still touching, the room felt different. Charged. Decided. Russo cleared his throat from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt paradise, but we have a way in. The plan formed fast and elegant, the way only desperate people can build beautiful things. They would leak a single encrypted file to Marco's people, coordinates to an abandoned Moretti warehouse in Palermo, supposedly containing the original Vineyard grant and a hard drive with every remaining forgery plate. Irresistible bait. Marco would come himself. Men like him always needed to touch the thing they were stealing. Dante would be waiting. Naomi added the final touch, a public press packet timed to auto-release in 48 hours. Every piece of evidence, every forged document, every transfer. If Dante died, the world would still know the truth. You're betting your life, she said. I'm betting on the woman who sees everything, he answered. By nightfall the bait was sent. At 2:17 a.m. the reply came, encrypted, arrogant. Exactly as predicted. I'll be there at dawn. Bring the waitress. I want to watch her face when the Moretti name dies with you. Dante read it aloud, then crushed the burner phone in his fist. He looked at Naomi across the war table, eyes burning with something that looked a lot like tomorrow.
Pack light, he said.
We're going home. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Marco smiled at the message, already writing the ending in his head. He had no idea the woman who saw everything had just rewritten it. Dear viewers, before we watch Naomi Cole walk off that Palermo stage into a life she never dared imagine, one where the world finally sees her and the shadows finally stand behind her instead of over her, I need to ask you something. Where are you listening to this story right now? Curled up in bed with the lights low? On your commute, headphones drowning out the city? In the break room at 2 a.m., stealing 10 minutes of escape? Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I read every single one. And if you felt your heart stop the moment that quiet waitress in the corner whispered, Signore non fermi, if you held your breath while she dismantled $100 million forgery with nothing but the truth and a steady voice, if you're already falling for the way Dante Moretti looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd touched in years, hit that subscribe button. Smash the like. Turn on notifications. Because I drop a new chapter of this dark, delicious, slow burn Mafia redemption story every single day, and tomorrow we're going deeper. The first night Naomi spends under Dante's roof with no guards at the door, the quiet conversation where he finally tells her what protection really means to a man like him, and the moment she decides whether to step into the light for good or pull him into it with her. You do not want to miss what happens when the woman who is supposed to stay invisible becomes the only person a king can't live without. 3 days later in Palermo, the Grand Hotel Et de Palms, the same ballroom where Lucky Luciano once toasted the New World. Today, every camera on the planet pointed at the simple wooden podium bearing the Moretti crest. Dante walked out alone. No bodyguards visible. No armor. Just a black suit, bandaged ribs hidden beneath crisp linen, and the kind of calm that comes when a man has already buried everything he was willing to lose. He did not smile. Good morning. My name is Dante Moretti. For 38 years, I have been what the headlines called me, a king in the shadows. Today, I am here to burn those shadows down. The room detonated, shutters, shouted questions, live feeds spiking across every continent. He raised one hand, and the noise died like someone pulled a plug. Effective immediately, the Moretti family is dissolving its interests in narcotics trafficking, human smuggling, and extortion. Every ledger, every route, every name has been delivered to the FBI, Europol, and the Italian Anti-Mafia Directorate. Accounts worth $4.7 billion have been frozen and will be redirected to victim restitution.
Gasps.
A reporter actually dropped her phone. Second, Dante continued, voice steady steel. We are exposing an international forgery syndicate operating out of Odessa, Naples, and Miami that has falsified historical documents, land titles, and judicial evidence for cartel and mafia clients worldwide. $100 million in fraudulent Sicilian land claims alone. The ringleader, my former consul Marco Fiorentino, was taken into custody by Italian authorities 90 minutes ago in the catacombs beneath Monreal. He will not see daylight again. He let that settle. Third, I am establishing the Cole Foundation for Historical Document Preservation, an independent, fully funded institute dedicated to training the next generation of authenticators and protecting cultural heritage from exactly the kind of fraud that nearly destroyed my family. Its first director will be announced in a moment. 100 voices roared at once. Who exposed the conspiracy? Was there an inside source? Mr. Moretti, who saved your life? Dante stepped aside. For the first time in 4 years, Naomi Cole walked into the light on purpose. The room went dead silent for one stunned heartbeat, then erupted into white-hot chaos. Cameras fired like machine guns. Phones rose like a forest of black mirrors. She wore a simple emerald dress that made her skin glow against the marble backdrop, hair in a sleek twist that no longer hid her face. No fear in her eyes, only fire. Dante spoke into the microphone one last time. The waitress who saw what experts missed, he said, voice carrying over the storm. The woman who refused to stay invisible when a lie was about to swallow history. My life is intact because of Dr. Naomi Cole. He turned to her, something fierce and tender in his expression that no camera could fully capture. Dr. Cole, he said, offering the podium, the world is listening. Naomi stepped forward. The noise somehow grew louder, yet her voice cut through it clean and unafraid. My name is Naomi Cole. For years ago, I put my degrees away to keep my brother alive. Last week I took them back out to keep a man honest. She smiled, small and devastating. Turns out truth is the most expensive thing I've ever served. Laughter rippled through the room, shocked, delighted, disbelieving. She laid out the evidence in crisp, merciless detail, the polymer wax, the impossible ink, the deepfake codec, the forged succession clause. Every slide a death blow to the conspiracy. When the final image appeared, Marco in handcuffs, mouth twisted in rage, the ballroom detonated into sustained applause. Later, when the networks replayed it 1,000 times, they would call it the moment the invisible became inevitable. Offers flooded in before she left the stage. The Smithsonian, the Getty, Interpol, 3 Ivy League chairs, a 7-figure book deal, private collectors begging for her eyes on their collections. Her face, beautiful, exhausted, triumphant, was on every screen from Tokyo to Sao Paulo. And for the first time since Marcus got sick, Naomi Cole was safe. Not hidden, safe in the open, because no one would ever dare touch the woman who brought down an empire with nothing but the truth. Hours later, sunset bled across the Tyrrhenian Sea. They stood on the terrace of a small villa above Cefalu. No guards, no cameras, just salt wind and the sound of waves on ancient stone. Dante handed her a glass of wine from the real vineyard, the one that had started everything. I offered you money once, he said quietly. You refused it. I didn't save you for money. I know. He set his glass down untouched. You saved me for something I didn't know I was allowed to want. A world where I don't have to choose between surviving and being decent. Naomi looked at him, at the man who had burned his kingdom to build something better, and felt the last piece inside her click into place. What happens now, Dante Moretti? He took her hand, pressed it over his heart where the bullet had almost ended them both. Now, he said, we write the next chapter. Together. And this time, no forgeries. Far below, the sea kept its old secrets. Above them, the sky turned the color of new parchment, blank, vast, waiting for whatever truth they decided to put there next. Dear viewers, so what do you think? Did Naomi Cole, the invisible black waitress with a Columbia master's and a brother on dialysis, finally get the life she deserved? Did Dante Moretti, the Don of Miami's most feared family, earn the right to step out of the shadows after all those years of blood and silence? And did they, together, prove that redemption isn't handed down by bloodlines, it's forged in the moment someone chooses to speak the truth, when staying quiet would have been so much easier? Drop a comment and tell me, could you have done what Naomi did? Spoken 5 words in perfect Italian to the most dangerous man in the room, knowing it might cost you everything? Could you have risked your life, your family, your invisibility for a stranger's legacy and for the simple, stubborn belief that a lie should never win? Or have you ever been someone's Dante? The one who looked at a woman everyone else saw as furniture and said, "No, you're the sharpest mind I've ever met." The one who burned an empire to the ground just to build something honest on the ashes? We all need people who refuse to let us disappear. People who see the scholar beneath the uniform, the humanity beneath the legend, the future beneath the fear. If this story hit you in the chest, the terrified waitress who became the woman who toppled a mafia coup with nothing but parchment, ink, and unbreakable nerve, the Don who found his soul in the eyes of the one person who never needed his money or feared his name, the brother who got to keep breathing because his sister refused to stay silent, then smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. I drop new high-stakes, slow-burn redemption thrillers every single day, and the next one is already waiting in the vault. Like this video, if you believe family isn't the name on the deed, it's the person who stands between you and the bullet, between you and the lie, between you and the darkness that wants to rewrite who you are. This is your channel for stories where the quiet ones turn out to be the deadliest, where Waitress becomes legend, where a mafia boss learns that the most powerful thing he can offer isn't protection. It's a future where a brilliant woman never has to hide again. Until tomorrow, remember, you don't have to wear a crown to change a bloodline. Sometimes all it takes is one voice in a marble vault saying, "Signore non fermi." Be someone's Naomi. Spot the forgery. Speak the truth. Save the empire. Now go check on the people you love And maybe, just maybe, leave the light on for the ones still learning how to be seen. See you in the next video.